My Sunday started with the sound of a belly flop followed by a child's scream and someone yelling, "Cannonball!" I shot up from my recliner thinking someone had broken into the backyard. I bolted out the sliding door still in pajama pants, and what I saw froze me. 10, maybe 12 people were splashing around in my pool like it was a hotel resort. Karen, the nosy, entitled neighbor I'd already had 3 prior run-ins with, was lounging on one of my private patio chairs, sunglasses on, her hand in a family-sized bag of my chips she had apparently helped herself to from my outdoor fridge. A greasy teenager was jumping off the edge into the shallow end, while toddlers ran with wet feet across my freshly sealed concrete. The grill was open, and someone, some random uncle in cargo shorts, was cooking sausages over flames like he owned the place. I hadn't invited a single soul, and as the chaos unfolded in front of me, I just blinked, processing what looked more like a beach party in a beer commercial than my own backyard. This wasn't just a pool party. This was an invasion. And Karen? She didn't even flinch. She turned to me, lifted her sunglasses, and said with a completely straight face, "Oh hey. We figured since you weren't using it, we'd take a dip. Hope that's cool." Hope that's cool? I was standing barefoot, completely speechless, staring at a woman who brought an army into my property like it was public space. I looked at the wet footprints all over the tile, the overturned deck chairs, the snack wrappers already littering the grass, and suddenly something inside me just clicked. Because this wasn't a one-time fluke. Karen had a pattern. She once parked her SUV blocking my driveway and told me to just use the other side. She had her dog poop on my lawn for a month straight until I installed a camera. But this took the cake. She hadn't just crossed a line, she cannonballed over it. I took a breath and calmly said, "Karen, this is private property." She rolled her eyes. "Oh please, don't be such a gatekeeper. The kids just needed to cool off." I looked over and saw 2 of those kids, emptying juice boxes into my pool filter and laughing. One of the older relatives, some guy with Bluetooth earbuds and a tank top that said "Suns out, guns out," was sitting on the diving board, texting, completely unbothered. "Also," she added casually, "you never said we couldn't come over." I nearly laughed. Because I never imagined I'd need to put up a "No unauthorized pool parties" sign, Karen. She stood up, wiped Dorito dust on my patio cushion, and started pacing like she was the one being wronged. "I mean, we're neighbors, Sam. We should be able to use the amenities of the community. Sharing is caring. Besides, I pay HOA fees too." That was when I realized she genuinely didn't see anything wrong with what she had done. To her, the idea of boundaries was an inconvenience. The concept of asking permission was optional. She acted like, because we lived in the same zip code, my backyard was a public park. And I'll be honest, I almost threw them all out right then and there. But something told me to pause. Because the thing Karen didn't know, and what would soon flip this story entirely, was that I wasn't just the homeowner. I was the developer who built this gated community. The systems, the software, the access points, everything from the smart gate to the back-end code controlling the neighborhood infrastructure, I had designed or approved myself. I still had administrative access to override and manage security. And suddenly, watching Karen splash into my pool like a victorious Viking, a better plan began forming. Instead of yelling, I said, "Karen, enjoy yourselves. I'll be inside." Her smug smile told me she thought she'd won. I went back in, grabbed my phone, and checked the smart home app. My cameras were recording everything. Footage of her pulling open the gate without permission. Her niece forcing the fridge open. One of her kids dragging my speaker system by its cord. All time-stamped and crystal clear. I sent a backup of the clips to my cloud folder, and then I pulled up the security software for the gated pool access system. One little tweak to the back-end code, a setting change from keypad access to biometric-only, and a saved update that would go live by Friday. She'd never even see it coming. The rest of the afternoon was oddly satisfying. I watched as her uncle used my floaties as a beer cooler, and a cousin tried to chase my cat off the roof with a pool noodle. At one point, Karen yelled at me through the glass door asking if I had more pool towels. I nodded politely and locked the door behind me. Let them enjoy this victory lap. Let them think they've taken over. Because the next time she tried this, she'd find herself locked out by the very system she didn't know I still controlled. Karen had made one mistake too many, and this time, the retaliation wouldn't be loud or aggressive. It would be digital, invisible, and perfect. That night, as the sun set and Karen finally herded her sunburned family out the gate, she waved at me like nothing had happened. "See? No harm done," she called out. I just smiled and replied, "Hope you enjoyed it." She winked and said, "We'll be back next weekend." I nodded again, suppressing a grin. "Sure you will, Karen. Try opening that gate next weekend. Because the code? It's already changed. And the only person with access is me." By Monday morning, the memory of Karen's aquatic invasion was still boiling in my mind like a hot kettle. I walked into the HOA office, not in anger but with a purpose. I wasn't just going to complain. I was going to document, prove, and eliminate every ounce of plausible deniability Karen might try to hide behind. The receptionist, a bored 20-something with oversized headphones and a cup of iced coffee, barely looked up as I signed in. But when I asked to speak to Jenna, the HOA president, she raised an eyebrow. I could tell from her expression I wasn't the first neighbor to come in with a Karen complaint, but I was probably the first to come with evidence meticulously labeled by timestamp, GPS logged, and ready to be forwarded to legal. Jenna greeted me in her usual efficient tone, clearly expecting a minor issue. That changed within 30 seconds of me showing her the footage. She watched Karen swipe open my side gate, march in with her extended family, and proceed to treat my property like a city pool. The part where Karen's nephew unzipped my outdoor storage and pulled out pool toys got a low whistle from Jenna. But it was the shot of Karen reaching into my outdoor fridge and handing out sodas that made her lean forward. "She didn't even ask?" Jenna asked, clearly stunned. I shook my head. "She acted like she was entitled to it. Said the pool was basically a community asset. I have audio too." I played the part where Karen claimed, loudly and confidently, that since I wasn't using it, we figured we'd enjoy it. Jenna looked up from the screen and rubbed her temples. "She filed a complaint against you yesterday," she said flatly. That stopped me for a moment. "I'm sorry, what?" She opened a folder and slid it over. Karen had accused me of discrimination, of denying community members equal access to recreational amenities, and had even claimed I'd cursed at her children. She also alleged that I left the gate unlocked on purpose and had a reputation for being antisocial and territorial. I could barely believe what I was reading. I had the high-definition footage of her niece chasing my cat with a pool skimmer, and she had the nerve to call me a menace? Fortunately, Jenna wasn't buying it. "Between you and me," she said, "this isn't her first fabricated complaint. But she's loud and she files forms like she's on a mission. You'd be surprised how many neighbors just let it go to avoid drama." That explained a lot. Karen was a chronic boundary smasher, and most people simply didn't have the time or energy to push back. But I did. And I wasn't about to let her frame me in the process. That evening I made two decisions. First, I'd update the biometric security immediately instead of waiting until Friday. Second, I'd escalate things discreetly. I opened my system console and bypassed the community interface entirely, logging into the developer backend. The pool gate, the outdoor camera motion sensors, and even the old irrigation box Karen once complained made too much noise, were all on the same network I'd installed 5 years ago. I updated the access list, revoked all keypad codes, and linked the entrance to a new device, my fingerprint scanner. Only I, my wife, and our housekeeper had access now. For extra flair, I created a backup motion alert. If anyone stepped into the side yard while the system was armed, It would ping my phone and send an automatic 5-second clip to a private cloud folder. Not only that, it would play an automated message from my speaker system. This area is restricted to authorized residents. Step away. Polite, but just ominous enough to spook off another uninvited picnic. 2 days later, the test came quicker than expected. It was Wednesday afternoon. A little overcast, mid-70s, the kind of weather that screams, pool optional. I was working from home when my phone buzzed. Motion detected. Gate proximity alert. I glanced at the clip. Karen. Of course. Wearing oversized sunglasses and holding what looked like a bag of floaties. Her kids were with her again, carrying pool noodles and towels like they were marching into summer camp. I watched in real time as she reached for the keypad and punched in the same code she'd used last time. It blinked red. She tried again. Red again. She looked confused. Stepped back. Tried another sequence. Then she leaned forward and inspected the panel like it had betrayed her. After a few seconds of awkward silence, she pulled out her phone and made a call. I stepped outside quietly just in time to hear her on speaker with someone. "I swear he changed the code just to spite me," she hissed. "I'm going to call the HOA. This is exclusion. This is retaliation. He's violating community sharing regulations." I walked right up to the fence and waved. She saw me and immediately launched into a performance. "Oh Sam. Hey. Looks like your gate isn't working properly." Her tone was sugary sweet, but I could hear the frustration bubbling underneath. "Probably a glitch," she said, but the kids were really looking forward to swimming again. I kept my tone neutral. "The system's been upgraded. It's fingerprint only now." She blinked. "Excuse me. No more code access. Too many people coming through without permission. It's safer this way." Her lips tightened. "You can't just lock people out of community amenities like that." I smiled. "This is private property, Karen. The pool isn't community access. Never has been. And you knew that. You just chose to ignore it." She started to say something, but I gently cut her off. "I also have footage of last weekend. The trespassing. The fridge. The unauthorized use of my equipment. It's all backed up, and I've already sent a copy to the HOA. So before you escalate, I'd really think about what comes next." Karen's mouth opened, then closed. She clutched her phone and turned to her kids. "Let's go. This man doesn't believe in neighborly love." As they walked away, one of the kids asked, "Why can't we just use our own pool?" Karen snapped, "Because ours is smaller and boring." That night, I received an email from the HOA. Jenna thanked me for the footage and mentioned the board had called a special session to address repeated policy violations by a resident. I knew exactly who that meant. And as I sat on my patio with a drink in hand, watching the calm ripples of the now peaceful pool, I knew I'd taken the right step. Karen wasn't just a nuisance anymore, she was now on record. And the walls, both physical and digital, were officially up. By the time Saturday rolled around, the neighborhood was buzzing, and not in the usual lawnmower and dog barking way. Karen's social media post had lit the digital match, and now the wildfire of false outrage was burning across the local Facebook group, her Instagram, and even some oddly curated HOA community forums. She had posted a filtered selfie of herself in front of my locked pool gate with a massive pout, captioned with something that read like a bad courtroom drama. "Locked out of my own neighborhood pool by a bitter neighbor. Who else thinks this is totally unfair? Hashtag community matters, hashtag momlife, hashtag let us swim." What followed were dozens of supportive comments from people who clearly didn't know the full story. But even more interestingly, the tide started to shift as the truth came out. An anonymous user, who I suspected was Jenna from the HOA, commented with a link to a private Google Drive folder titled Karen's Pool Invasion, Receipts. And inside were screenshots of Karen's behavior, video footage of her opening my fridge, kids dumping juice in the pool filter, and one of her guests attempting to balance a beer can on the diving board while doing a backflip. The fallout was swift. Her post was flooded with laughing reactions, popcorn emojis, and people tagging their friends with comments like, "Told you she was crazy," and "Is this the same woman who screamed at my kid for touching a community bench?" Karen's attempt to rally digital support had backfired spectacularly. By the next morning, she had deleted the original post and made her accounts private. But the damage was done. The local gossip cycle had already shifted its focus to her and her circus-like entitlement. Her name had become shorthand for neighborhood drama. She was no longer just Karen. She was Pool Karen. Later that week, the monthly HOA meeting turned into something that felt more like a reality show reunion special than a formal gathering. Chairs were pulled up early, the room packed with residents curious to see if the rumors were true. Karen showed up late, wearing oversized sunglasses indoors and walking with the inflated confidence of someone who still believed they were the victim. Jenna, poised and sharp, called the meeting to order and said there were several matters of community concern to address. The moment Karen's name was mentioned, a collective wave of rustling and throat-clearing rolled through the room. Jenna laid out the timeline clearly. The trespassing, the unauthorized use of private property, the fraudulent complaint. She projected screenshots and muted clips of the security footage to the community monitor, just long enough for people to get the picture without turning the meeting into a surveillance reel binge. Karen tried to interrupt more than once, insisting that everything had been taken out of context. "I was just trying to bring people together," she said. "It's not my fault he hoards his space like a museum. Some of us believe in sharing." The crowd wasn't buying it. One neighbor stood up and asked why Karen didn't just ask before bringing a dozen people over. Another asked if the juice-dumping footage was her kid. Karen scoffed and turned red. Her voice got louder, but her credibility got smaller. The board voted unanimously to impose sanctions. Karen's access to all shared HOA amenities was revoked for 6 months. Not just my pool, everything. Community gym, clubhouse, garden area. On top of that, she was fined for property damage from the filter incident and issued a formal written warning for making a false complaint. One more infraction, and she'd face a temporary suspension of her HOA membership privileges entirely. That part nearly made her choke. Karen stormed out before the meeting ended, muttering something about legal action and discrimination, but nobody followed her. Nobody clapped. Nobody looked sympathetic. What came next was something Karen hadn't prepared for, her own family pulling away. A few days later, I got a message through the HOA portal from someone named Lisa. Turned out, she was Karen's sister. She apologized for what happened at my pool and said she hadn't realized how bad Karen's behavior had gotten until seeing it on video. Apparently, she and a few of the family members had been dragged into the backyard takeover under the impression that it was pre-approved or part of a community event. Lisa even offered to help pay for the cleaning fee, but I declined. I told her the cameras had already caught everything and that the HOA was handling it. Still, her message felt sincere. It also confirmed that Karen had been lying not only to the neighborhood but to her own relative. I started noticing small shifts in the days that followed. Karen's kids, usually loud and visible around the cul-de-sac, started walking home with their heads down. They weren't to blame for their mother's behavior, and it was sad to watch them become collateral damage. At one point, I saw the teenage son hesitating by my mailbox, probably wanting to apologize or explain, but he never did. I didn't push it. The whole situation had spiraled into something way beyond a simple pool party gone wrong. It had become a neighborhood case study in what happens when entitlement crashes into accountability. Then came the cherry on top. I got a call from the local news blog. The kind that covers lost cats, farmers markets, and homeowner spats that go viral. They wanted a statement. Apparently, the video clips had been reshared to a larger Reddit thread and picked up by an account that specialized in neighborhood nightmares. I declined to give an interview, but they still ran a story titled, "Gatekeeper Genius or HOA Hero." The man who digitally beat back Karen. The thumbnail? A blurry shot of Karen mid-scream, cropped from the security footage with her mouth wide open and arms flailing. The comments section was a battlefield of opinions, but most people cheered for the quiet guy who used tech to set boundaries without ever throwing a punch. That weekend, for the first time in what felt like ages, my pool was peaceful. I invited over a few close friends and neighbors. Not a giant bash, just a relaxed evening with music, burgers, and people who actually asked before showing up. There were no tantrums, no stomping feet, no lectures about sharing. Just good conversation and the sound of water lapping gently against the tile. One neighbor leaned over and said, "You know, if Karen hadn't messed up so badly, half the people here wouldn't even have talked to each other. So weirdly, thanks to her, this place is more united than ever." I laughed. It was true. In a strange, chaotic way, Karen had given us all a shared story, a ridiculous villain, and a reminder of why boundaries matter. But this wasn't over. I knew Karen well enough to know she wouldn't disappear quietly. She would stew, plot, and try to reclaim whatever social power she thought she had lost. What she didn't know was that my preparations had only just begun. Because when entitlement pushes too far, there's always someone ready to push back, and this time, the whole neighborhood was watching. It was almost predictable. Karen couldn't let things go. For the first week after the HOA sanctions, things were quiet. Too quiet. She didn't storm into meetings. She didn't post any new rants online. She didn't even make a passive-aggressive comment when passing neighbors. But that wasn't Karen being remorseful. That was Karen calculating. People like her didn't give up, they waited. And then, one Thursday night just before midnight, my phone buzzed with a security alert from the motion sensors. I sat up in bed and opened the app. There she was, Karen, wearing all black, crouched by the side of my property, holding a flashlight in her mouth and a pair of garden gloves on her hands like she was performing some late-night espionage mission. In her hands was a mess of jumper cables and what looked like an old car battery. It took me a moment to process what she was doing, but then it became clear. She was trying to manually short the power to my pool gate. She traced the cable from the panel I had installed years ago, one that linked the outdoor lighting and gate systems. She thought if she could kill the power, the biometric lock would disengage, and she could get access back, or at least send a message. Unfortunately for her, I had seen this coming. Months ago, I'd upgraded the entire pool security system with solar backup and internal failsafes that kept it locked even when the power cut. More than that, I'd rigged it to respond to tampering with a few surprises of its own. Just as she hooked the final cable to the panel, the entire backyard flooded with LED spotlights, illuminating the night like a stadium. An automated voice echoed from a hidden speaker. "Security breach detected. Footage is being recorded. Please step away from the property." She froze, eyes wide like a deer caught mid-crime. She looked around frantically, clearly hoping no one saw her. But every light in my house clicked on, and a second later, the cameras captured her bolting toward the sidewalk with the battery still in her hands. I watched her flee on the app in real time, her shadow dancing across the fence line. I didn't need to chase her. I didn't even need to say a word. The whole thing had been recorded, time-stamped, and uploaded directly to both my cloud storage and an HOA security drive I'd created just for situations like this. She had no idea just how deep my systems ran. The next morning, I sent the footage to Jenna, along with a brief summary. Within an hour, she responded. "Thank you, Sam. We'll be forwarding this to the local police as well. This is no longer just an HOA issue." By lunch, 2 officers were knocking on Karen's door. She tried to play it off, claiming it was a misunderstanding, that she was retrieving something from the yard and had accidentally touched the cables. But the officers had already seen the footage. They'd watched her crawl across my fence line, fiddle with a panel, and run like a guilty cartoon character when the lights came on. They informed her she was now facing charges for trespassing, attempted vandalism, and violation of a written HOA sanction. She didn't get arrested on the spot, but she was served with a formal citation and warned that any further action on her part would escalate quickly. For most people, that would have been the final straw. But Karen still had one trick left, one pathetic attempt to regain control of the narrative. A few days later, I noticed a delivery truck idling outside my house. It didn't drop off anything. Instead, a woman in a delivery uniform walked to the side gate and rattled the lock. She had a clipboard, looked confused, and finally left after peeking around awkwardly. Something didn't sit right. That night, while reviewing the security footage out of habit, I zoomed in on the woman's face. It was Karen in a cheap disguise. Baseball cap, oversized sunglasses, delivery vest that probably came from a thrift store, and a ponytail tucked under. She had tried to sneak onto my property dressed as a courier. It would have been funny if it weren't so bizarre. I compiled the footage and sent it to Jenna again, this time with the subject line Karen's Greatest Hits, Bonus Edition. Jenna didn't even reply with text, just a laughing emoji followed by, forwarding to Officer Green now. Within 2 days, Karen received another visit. This time, they made it clear that if she so much as set foot within 2 feet of my gate again, she'd be arrested. Period. No warnings, no citations, just cuffs. After that, the fallout came faster. Her reputation in the neighborhood had already been shredded, but now she was radioactive. Parents told their kids to stay away from her house. Neighborhood watch volunteers started steering clear. Even her former gossip buddy, Linda from across the street, stopped replying to her text. It wasn't just the sanctions or the videos. It was the cumulative weight of every outrageous thing she'd done, stacked one on top of the other until no one could deny the pattern. For her kids, the social damage was even worse. The older one, probably 15, got caught trying to sneak into a neighbor's garage to grab a bike pump, and the homeowners accused him of casing the place. The younger ones stopped riding bikes altogether. They just stayed indoors now, windows drawn. I actually started to feel a little bad for them. Not because they were innocent, though they probably were, but because their mom's ego had made them targets of ridicule and suspicion. The real Karen effect wasn't just chaos, it was collateral damage. Meanwhile, the neighborhood started healing. Jenna organized a meeting focused on property respect and personal boundaries, which was clearly just a polite way of saying how not to be a Karen. I spoke briefly during the meeting, just to reinforce that it wasn't about controlling others or being territorial. It was about protecting your space, your peace, your right to live without someone treating your property like a free-for-all. After the meeting, multiple neighbors approached me to thank me, not just for handling Karen, but for doing it without turning the neighborhood into a war zone. One of them even joked that I should teach a class on digital boundary defense. I laughed it off, but inside, I felt a strange mix of vindication and exhaustion. This whole ordeal had started with a simple assumption, that someone could help themselves to what wasn't theirs. And it had snowballed into a full-scale, almost absurd standoff involving police, disguises, and spotlight sirens. Karen stayed mostly quiet after that. No more tricks, no more posts, no more middle-of-the-night nonsense. She seemed to understand, finally, that this wasn't a fight she could win. Not because I was mean or cruel, but because I was relentless. I didn't fight with fists. I fought with foresight. And every digital lock, every camera feed, every automated warning was a reminder that boundaries aren't suggestions, they're reality. And reality doesn't bend just because someone like Karen pouts hard enough. A month later, the neighborhood felt like it had been reset. The lawns looked greener, the sidewalks quieter, the air just a little less tense. For once, there wasn't some dramatic yelling echoing across the fence or another mysterious complaint showing up in everyone's HOA inbox. Karen's house, once a hotspot for noisy arguments and unauthorized barbecues, now looked like a shut-in bunker. Curtains drawn, yard unkept, not even her kids playing in the driveway anymore. It was like someone had unplugged her whole world. The neighborhood had moved on, but I knew Karen hadn't. People like her didn't just disappear. They waited. They watched. And sure enough, she tried one last desperate trick, but this time, it ended before it could even begin. It happened during what was meant to be a calm Saturday gathering. I'd invited over a small group of neighbors for a casual swim and grill. Nothing extravagant. Just a few folks who had shown kindness during the drama. Families brought snacks, kids tossed water balloons, adults sipped iced drinks in lounge chairs under the patio umbrella. It was normal, peaceful, like it used to be before Karen's chaos started infecting everything. We even joked about printing out fake Karen repellent labels to stick on the fence as a neighborhood inside joke. The gate was locked, of course, biometric access still in place. The new system worked flawlessly. Only those with my fingerprint or temporary QR code access could come in. I had even upgraded the motion alert system to include facial recognition, just in case someone tried to sneak around again. The system pinged silently whenever someone lingered by the entrance more than 10 seconds. So when my phone vibrated softly in my pocket, I glanced down casually, expecting it to be another neighbor arriving late. But instead, I saw her. Karen was back. She wasn't in costume this time. No disguise, no fake delivery uniform. She stood at the corner of the property just outside the fence, wearing dark sunglasses and a tense, too-wide smile that screamed she didn't know whether to beg or bark. In her hand was a pie, pecan or pumpkin, hard to tell through the plastic wrap. She just stood there, unmoving, holding it out like a peace offering. Some sort of weak symbolic gesture. I didn't go to her. I stayed where I was, half watching through the camera feed while chatting with a neighbor. I wanted to see what she'd do. She eventually knocked. Well, more like tapped, on the fence with her knuckles. It triggered the proximity alert. Her voice was barely audible, but the mic picked it up. Just wanted to say I'm sorry, thought maybe we could talk. She said it without energy, like someone reading off a script they didn't write. She lingered for a moment longer, then quietly placed the pie on the ground and walked away. She didn't look back. I didn't go get the pie. I left it where it was, sitting there on the pavement like a strange monument to all the boundaries she'd trampled. Later that evening, after everyone had left, I checked the footage again. No trick. No tantrums. Just that brief, awkward moment. Maybe she finally understood that her efforts to bulldoze her way through life weren't working anymore. Or maybe she thought the pie would buy her a way back into everyone's good graces. Either way, the answer was the same. No access. About a week later, a moving truck showed up in front of her house. Slowly, over 2 days, furniture was carried out, boxes stacked in the back. There was no dramatic farewell. No teary goodbye or final declaration of war. Just quiet loading, a few tense glances from the movers who probably sensed the neighborhood's eyes watching them, and then finally, Karen herself stepping out with a last duffel bag and slamming the door behind her. She climbed into the passenger seat of a beat-up silver SUV and vanished. Rumor had it she'd listed the house in a panic after being warned that any further incidents would result in a civil suit from the HOA. Others said her sister finally convinced her to leave after being embarrassed one too many times by her antic. Whatever the reason, the house sat empty for 3 weeks until a young couple moved in. Sweet people. Quiet. Respectful. The kind who ask before doing anything and show up to neighborhood cleanups with homemade lemonade. A refreshing change. After Karen was gone, something strange happened. Neighbors started bonding more. People who had once just nodded politely at the mailbox were now exchanging stories, organizing weekend brunches, even helping each other repaint fences and plant flowers. Karen had, unintentionally, been a unifying force. Her entitlement had rallied everyone else to appreciate the importance of boundaries and civility. No one wanted to deal with another Karen incident, and that shared trauma made the community tighter. One afternoon, Jenna dropped by with a framed photo. It was a group picture from the last HOA event. Everyone was smiling, standing near the clubhouse fountain, with a little sign in front that read, "Respect lives here." She handed it to me and said, "Figured you deserved to have this. You started the change, whether you meant to or not." I accepted it with a grin. The neighborhood hadn't just survived Karen, it had outgrown her. As for the pool, it returned to being a calm haven. The only splashes were joyful ones, the only visitors were invited, and the only music playing was from actual playlists and not someone's blaring Bluetooth speaker set to maximum volume. No more floaties being used as beer holders, no more unauthorized cookouts, no more shouting about shared spaces, while dumping chips on private lounge chairs. It was peaceful. Earned peace. Not the kind that comes naturally, but the kind you fight for with patience, planning, and a whole lot of camera angles. One final thing changed. Right by the pool gate, just above the new lock system, I mounted a small wooden plaque. I burned the words into it myself using an old wood-burning tool I hadn't touched in years. It read, "Entry earned through respect, not assumption." It was simple, clear, and for anyone who remembered the saga of Karen, impossible to misinterpret. The plaque stayed there long after the memories of her faded. And every time someone new asked about it, I'd smile and say, "It's just a reminder of a lesson we all learned the hard way." Because sometimes, it only takes one uninvited cannonball to teach an entire neighborhood how to swim together, with boundaries.